Barbados on 92.1 FM, and a special hello to you listening in Berlin on 94.8 FM. Let's find out what business stories are gripping other parts of the globe now. Cindy Su is our reporter in Taiwan. Cindy, Taiwan's government asking Google to blur its maps, which show some military top-secret installations on the disputed Taiping Island. It was once kept secret.
Yes, that's right. The government, the Coast Guard administration in Taiwan confirmed this week that they have asked Google to blur some images on its maps. And these images show very clearly some new military installations. Actually, we're not sure that they're military, but the government is not saying what they really are. But many believe that they are military because Taiping Island is considered a military restricted area. And because of the dispute over the South China Sea and Taiping Island being the biggest island in the Spratly group of islands in the South China Sea, Taiwan definitely feels a need to defend this island, its claims to the island. It's controlled it since 1946, but it's worried that the other claimants will try to take over the island or that it will lose its claim in some way. So the Google Maps show the installations being 3 to 4 story tall buildings. We can't really say they're buildings. There's some kind of structure, and there's 3 on the coast of one side of the Taiping Island. Some of the analysts that have been interviewed say that they could be anti-aircraft gun towers to shoot down aircraft from the other claimants that might approach, or they could be anti-landing barriers to prevent the other claimants' boats from trying to land on Taiping Island and take it over. The government has refused to confirm any of this, but they did say that they have asked Google to blur the maps. Now, Google has just this week said that it does take security concerns seriously, and it is willing to discuss these issues with governments or officials. But it mentioned that in the past, such discussions have actually never led to the blurring of the images on its maps.
Well, I may be asking something that's, well, I may be missing something here, but surely if the map's already out there, it's a bit late to blur it now, isn't it?
Yes, definitely, because in this internet age, once the maps are out there, various media or even ordinary people will take them and post them all over the internet. So they are already out there, but the government still feels that it should ask Google to do this because there could be other installations that they will be building in the future. And if everything is shown to the public on Google Maps, then there's no secret about it. And the risk for Taiwan is that this could invite a lot of pressure and criticism from the other claimants, and also the United States, which wants to keep the South China Sea free for freedom of navigation and freedom of flight. So they want this area to be sort of everybody's. But the problem is Taiwan strongly believes this island is Taiwan. We've had officers
I'd
there
better be extremely alert around here.
And he believes that it is entitled to an exclusive economic zone of 200 nautical miles.
And despite this being a restricted zone, there's a company trying to get permission to take tourists.
Exactly. And that all came about because of the ruling by the International Court of Financial Organization in The Hague in July, which ruled that
I have an enemy in
none of the
sight.
islands in the South China Sea in the Spratly chain are actually islands. So they're not entitled to 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone. So that makes the Taiwanese sometimes quite eager to further cement their claim by promoting tourism there, by taking tourists there. But that they haven't gotten permission yet, so we'll see. Permission to ride Taiping Island.
Our reporter Cindy Su in Taiwan, thank you very much. Canadians could be forgiven for feeling rather smug at present. Their new Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of this week's United Nations General Assembly. His country's politics are as calm as those in the United States or Europe are volatile. Canada's economy recovered pretty well from the global financial crisis. Migration in Canada appears to be working pretty well. So what is Canada doing right that the rest of us can learn from? Well, we have our very own Canadian, of course, to answer these questions. Ralph Silver.
Yeah.
Ralph, Justin Trudeau looks like the golden boy. He must be getting criticised for something at home, isn't he?
Yeah, he's kind of a rock star, isn't he? He's doing really well on a global, and to be fair to him, he's actually doing very well domestically as well. He's being given a lot of opportunities. He's still new at the job, quite clearly. But he seems to be bringing great attention to the country and doing a reasonable job. And and very little complaints about him. Of course, it's not an election year, so that might change at an election year.
So why is it that Canada is doing so well and the rest of the world has so many problems?
Yeah, well, first thing is that we didn't suffer as much during the 2008 banking crisis. Our banks were far more stable, so we didn't have that we didn't suffer. We have a huge amount of natural resources. We're second only to Russia in terms of natural resources. So we have a lot of that to sell, a lot of that to maintain us, and we're only 35 million people in the second largest country in the world, so we got lots of space. And lastly, we have a big inferiority complex because we just happen to have the biggest neighbor. Our biggest neighbor to the south has Donald Trump, and we don't.
You are sounding so smug. So, in 10 seconds, is there anything that the rest of us can take from you?
Yeah, we know how to deal with winter. We know how to deal with cold. And that's the one thing that every Canadian knows how to deal with, is we're very rugged people because we have to be, because it gets really cold here.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Ralph Silver. Donald Trump has been upsetting people again. On Tuesday, he told a rally in North Carolina that African-American communities in the United States prompted the president of the legendary civil rights group, the NAACP, to accuse the Republican White House hopeful of an insulting degree of ignorance and insensitivity. So what does this latest row do to brand Trump? With just 45 days to go until polls open, a question for one of the world's leading branding experts, Rita Clifton.
I think what's very interesting in so many ways is that brand Trump does epitomise some of the great American values, freedom, capitalism, individualism, and so on.
I have an enemy in sight.
Fairness and equality, not so much. And that's really what we've been seeing in some of the extremely tactless comments that have been made today. It's not the first time he's made tactless comments. It certainly seems not to be the last one. But what's interesting here is that he represents something that clearly a lot of American people relate to in these times of uncertainty and fear. He represents being a strong man, uncompromising. And, when people, even like that, make screw-ups, then they tend to be forgiven, just like actually other brands.
So brands can make mistakes, and that means that Donald Trump can make mistakes too.
Well, he's certainly made a great deal of mistakes so far, and yet he still seems to be enjoying a lot of popularity in the polls. Yes, this is an interesting phenomenon about brands generally, and of course, personal brands as well, which is, people like Coca-Cola, like Apple, like Toyota. These have been strong brands that have made big screw-ups, and yet people forgive them.
People don't always forgive brands, though, do they? Sometimes a brand can make a mistake and that can be the last you hear of them.
Now, this is very interesting because, of course, it very much depends. If you've got a weak brand and a very big screw-up, then that tends to be curtains for that brand. If you've got a strong brand and not a very big screw-up, then, there's not much of a problem. The real interesting time is when you've got a strong brand and also you've got a very big screw-up. Now, Donald Trump seems to have made several screw-ups. What doesn't seem to have happened so far is that those screw-ups have been terminal. And that seems to be, because so many people relate to Donald Trump not coming from, the inside political world. He doesn't talk like politicians. And of course, normal politicians are what so many people have lost patience with. So he seems very different. He seems to speak his mind. I mean, it was very interesting. I'm speaking as a British person here, but when Nigel Farage went over to the States, Nigel Farage captured a lot of people's imaginations in the UK because he seemed not to be like a normal politician speaking political language. Now, of course, Brand Clinton does seem to be a very smooth and very experienced political operator, saying politically sophisticated things. Donald Trump sits outside that, and that, for so many people at the moment, is just what they want to hear.
Put aside which way people will vote on policies, just simply assessing the two candidates, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, on the strength of their brands. What are your thoughts as an expert in this area?
What's very interesting between the Clinton brand and the Trump brand is that the Trump brand if not a clean sheet of paper, it was certainly a clean sheet of paper as far as politics was concerned. Someone who didn't have a political history or any political baggage from the past. People perceive Donald Trump, whether this is true or not, as a highly successful business person who speaks it like it is. And again, this is not like the normal political brand or the normal political leaders we see. What's interesting about Brand Clinton is that this is almost the ultimate political professional brand, but it's also got historical baggage, a little bit like there was Bush baggage in the political sphere. Hillary Clinton has been preceded by her husband, and there are all sorts of issues around the Clinton brand that don't necessarily relate to Hillary, but nevertheless will be in people's minds.
And in just a little over 45 days, we will know the answer. That's branding expert Rita Clifton. Our guests today were Ralph Silver of the Silver Research Network in Toronto, and here in London in the studio with me, Step Up Confidence, Success and Attendance Day author Fenella Mail. You've been listening to Business Matters from the BBC.
I have an enemy in sight.
Thanks for tuning in.
This is the BBC World Service. Before the news, here's Harriet Wilson to tell you about the next World Book Club.
Anne Enright will be joining
I have an enemy in sight.
Novel, The Gathering, in which a large Irish family come together for the funeral of a raving brother. What emerges is a story of repressed memories, love and betrayal.
BBC World Book Club with Anne Enright from the 1st of October.
Эти уроды здесь! Я их чувствую!
За
This
сколько
is the
литров крови
BBC World
значок донора
Service,
дают?
bringing news from around the world to a global audience.
Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, is in the capital.
Our Europe editor, Katja Adler, was at the summit.
Let's turn to the BBC's Moscow correspondent, Steve Rosenberg.
Prim Ndukumakenge, live from Bujumbura.
Online, on mobile, anywhere. This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to Outlook. On today's programme, the couple who cared for their nation. Bilkis Eidi and her husband Abdul Sattar set up and ran much of Pakistan's healthcare system. They started off in a tiny dispensary in Karachi, but always had big ambitions.
People used to call him mad. They used to call him
It's my kill!
Nobody believed him. He would go into in-depth detail about what he wanted to achieve. He used to talk big. Something about him or some wish of his God fulfilled and granted him with what he had.
Over the years, Bilkis has helped to save over 16,000 abandoned children. She would also personally retrieve dead bodies.
I never gave up. I don't know from where God gave me the strength. I've picked up burnt bodies that have been cut up. I was a very different girl. Sometimes I think maybe I was a ghost, not a girl. And I had no idea where this strength was coming from.
More after the news.
Hello, I'm Jerry Smith with the BBC News. The Syrian army has announced a new offensive to retake rebel-controlled areas in Aleppo, where 250,000 people are living under siege. More from James Longman.
After months under siege and bombardment, the people of eastern Aleppo are now facing a major military offensive. The Syrian regime made the announcement on state television, telling residents to stay away from what they called terrorist positions. It is unclear whether the new offensive will involve ground troops, but the government has said there will be what they called exit points for fighters and civilians to flee should they wish. It comes after days of intense attacks. Residents have told the BBC about barrel bombs raining down on rebel-held neighbourhoods and fires breaking out throughout the district.
An international meeting aimed at reviving the collapsed Syria ceasefire agreement between the United States and Russia has broken up without progress in New York. The US Secretary of State John Kerry said Washington could not be the only one trying to hold open the door to peace. The UN envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, described the meeting as long, painful and disappointing. Speaking after the talks, Mr. Kerry said the only way to show credibility was to stop the airstrikes.
We need significant action now. It can't be based on exceptions and loopholes that every time are exploited by one party or another in order specifically to undermine the cessation of hostilities. It has to be achieved through a genuine and sustained reduction in violence. And the only way to achieve that is if the ones who have the air power simply stop using it.
Republican Democrats and U.S. intelligence committees say Russia is making a serious and concerted effort to try to influence the elections in November with computer hacks. Dianne Feinstein and Adam Schiff said the orders could only have come from very senior levels of the Russian government. They called on President Putin to end the hacking. The internet portal Yahoo has confirmed that hackers stole information from about 500 million public sources. Yahoo said it believed the 2014 attack had been state-sponsored. The data may have names, email addresses, telephone numbers, dates of birth, and passwords. Report.
Attack on Yahoo surfaced in August this year when a hacker known as Peace used information on the dark web. The company said it did not believe the attacker still had access to its
No way! I have an enemy in sight! I have an enemy in sight!
Verizon for $4.8 billion. It's unclear what effect this enormous breach may have on that deal.
News from the BBC. Prosecutors in the U.S. state of Oklahoma have charged a white policewoman with manslaughter over the shooting of an unarmed black man. Officer Betty Shelby killed 40-year-old Terrence Crutcher in the city of Tulsa last Friday. Police video footage showed him with his hands up, appearing to comply with police officers before he was shot. If convicted, Betty Shelby faces a minimum of 4 years in prison. The police chief of the U.S. city of Charlotte says video evidence does not conclusively prove that Keith Lamont Scott, a black man who was shot dead by police, was pointing a gun. President Obama has acknowledged there's a concern about racial inequalities in the American justice system. Speaking to ABC News, Mr. Obama urged protesters to use peaceful means to voice their concerns.
The way we change the system requires us to be able to reach out and engage the broader American community. And that requires being peaceful. That requires being thoughtful about what are the specific reforms you're looking for. The overwhelming majority of people who've been concerned about police-community relations doing it the right way. Every once in a while you see folks doing it the wrong way.
The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has arrived in Cuba on a visit aimed at boosting trade, which has declined in the past 30 years. In an interview with the official Communist Party paper Granma, he called for open dialogue to encourage investment on the island. Mr. Abe is the first to establish relations in 1929. The Venezuelan government says a referendum on whether to remove President Nicolas Maduro won't take place this year because of widespread fraud in the process of collecting signatures. The controversial ruling, announced by the Electoral Commission on Wednesday, has angered opposition leaders. They deny any irregularities. BBC News.
You're with Outlook, the programme that takes you around the world through extraordinary stories. I'm Matthew Bannister. Today, the Indian engineer who drove his solar-powered tuk-tuk all the way from Bangalore to London, and the Russian ballet dancer who was rejected by the Bolshoi for being too tall, but has still become a prima ballerina. Those stories later, but first, we meet one half of the couple who cared for a nation. Over the last 50 years, Bilkis Eidi and her husband Abdul Sattar Eidi have built up and run Pakistan's most impressive social enterprise. The Eidi Foundation started off with a tiny dispensary in a Karachi slum, but now provides healthcare to millions of people across Pakistan. They run everything from orphanages, clinics and maternity homes to centres for the mentally ill and disabled, mortuaries, soup kitchens and schools. They also have one of the world's biggest fleets of ambulances. And all of this is supported entirely by voluntary donations. The couple themselves continued to live a frugal life in the small flat over the original dispensary. And they always took a hands-on role, as you'll hear, getting involved in situations that many of us would find very distressing. Earlier this year, Abdul Sattar died at the age of 88. So I wanted to find out what life was like with a man who some regarded as a living saint. They first met when Bilkis was working as a nurse. Through an interpreter, she told me why she took up that profession.
स्कूल
I went to a local school in the street where Idi had his hospital. That is when I saw these women dressed in white uniforms. They used to be nurses, and I used to wear dresses. So I wanted to become a nurse. And I used to be paid 60 rupees a month at that time, and I was really happy.
And what did you know of Idi's reputation at that time?
So no one knew him at the time that I got married to him. He just had a dispensary and a maternity ward.
Something's
He had an
moving.
old car. Absolutely no publicity. His yearly donation was between 6,000 to 8,000 rupees. But he used to dream big. He used to say, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to buy that. So once he looked at me and he said, I will buy a plane one day. And I said, you will buy a plane? Put a hand in your pocket and all you'll find is a thread. I will buy a plane. And today, we have 3 planes and 1 house.
How long after you had first met him did he propose marriage to you?
He was 22 to 25 years older than me. And he had this friend who was a widow with a child, and we all thought that he was going to marry her. And for 12 years, she said, I can't marry a beggar. But he was in love with her, and he was terribly heartbroken. And after that, he sent out many proposals, but they were rejected. And then when he sent a proposal for me, because most of the women working with me in the nursing school were either divorced or too old. So I said, fine, I'll marry you. If it doesn't work, I'll divorce.
Wonderful story. So how did you see your future at that time when you were getting married? Because he, as you said, had big dreams. He wanted to create a healthcare system for his country. He wanted to do that on the basis of public donations. Were you signed up for that from the start? Were you committed to his vision of the future?
People used to call him mad. They used to call him a dreamer. Nobody believed him. He would go into detail, in-depth detail about what he wanted to achieve. He used to talk big, but then something about him or some wish of his God fulfilled and granted him with what he had. And as far as me feeling the responsibility is concerned, it was nothing. All I had was a dispensary and a maternity ward, and we just had to take dead bodies in the car from one place to another. It was never work for me. I used to burn the food I used to cook or put too much salt in it. And I would say, well, he's a man who's known to be very angry. I hope he doesn't get angry with me. But he always used to say, no, alhamdulillah, the food is very good. It tastes very good. And then he would leave and I would bring
Right. I think it must have been quite hard living with him sometimes because he had very frugal habits. Weren't you on the Hajj once when he refused to let you have warm clothes to keep you warm on the journey?
He was a miser. A miser. That man was a miser. You ask him for money and he would get in a bad mood. When we were in Quetta, it was really, really cold. And we went to the local Landa Bazaar, it used to be called. So that's somewhere we used to be able to get second or third hand clothes from London. And it was so cold that I wore pants and I wore a shirt and I wore a cap. And by God, I was so beautiful. I looked really nice. But it was really cold. I used to fight a lot with Idi. I used to fight with him a lot. I used to say, you're never home, you never do this, you're never around. And he used to say, who asked you to marry me? You married me yourself. And I used to be so emotional. I used to be always ready to fight with people if I was hurt or anything. But he always used to tell me, listen, learn to forgive and let go.
I believe that you had some very difficult experiences during the war between Pakistan and India in 1965. I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about what you experienced then when you were dealing with casualties of that fighting.
Bingo. There were so many bodies, pieces of bodies. I can't even explain. At that time, we used to have at least 40 women helpers, but we were never scared. I sometimes think how I wasn't scared of all these eyes coming out of faces, the tongues coming out, the heads slit open. I wasn't scared. People would ask me, why are you not scared? I used to say, there's nothing to be scared of. It's the people who are alive that are to be scared of. They are the ones who harm you. These poor things just have to be buried in the ground. I used to say the kalima over them because my mother used to say that you should ask forgiveness of the dead if you've hurt them during the process of their burial. Then we used to clean their faces, put the pieces together, put them on plastic, put cloth over them and bury them. And that was the time that gave me a lot of strength. I don't know from where God gave me the strength. We used to go to rivers and take our bodies from there, and the bodies used to be so swelled that water used to come out of them and we used to touch them. Burnt bodies, bodies that have been cut up. I was a very different girl. Sometimes I thought I was a ghost, not a girl. And I used to take the girls with me. I used to say, come do this work. I had no idea where the strength was coming from.
Did you and Edie involve your children in this work from a very early age?
When I used to go to drop off the bodies, he would say the children are going to go.
I heard a story that you used to argue with him because his idea of taking the children out for a treat was to invite them onto his ambulance when he was going around collecting up bodies. And you used to say, let's let them have some fun. Is that true?
We used to have fun when someone would die, when there was a dead body to pick. We would all get a chance to get out, to dress up. We'd take an outing out of it to go pick up a dead body. And we were actually going to pick up a dead body when we were robbed. They were robbers and they were on horses and they had these hammers in their hands and they wanted to rob us. But the woman, the dead child we were carrying, came out of the car and said, this is Abdul Sattar Idi. And those robbers got off from their horses and they came and they kissed Idi's hands and said, and they gave him 100 rupees and they said, we know that the day we die, you are the one who's going to pick our dead bodies. So he was such a man.
हमको कुछ भी नहीं बोला फिर हाँ कितना प्यारा डेनियल पर्ल को हमने रखा था ना तीन महीने तक हमने अपने.
And do you know that we also
I have an enemy in sight.
No way.
And I just feel that no religion tells us to kill anybody else in their name. And it was just very, very wrong what happened. And we kept his body in the morgue, and the American embassy called my son Faisal and they said, can we have his body back? So Faisal took out his body, he clothed him, he bathed him, he put him in the coffin, he made him look really nice and regal, and we gave the body back. But before giving the body back, I told Faisal, I said, can you go and get these 2 big bouquets and put them over his coffin and give him the respect that he deserves in death.
I want to ask about another very important project that you were particularly involved in, the Julas project, which involved cradles being placed outside the Edie centres so that people who had unwanted babies could leave them there and then you would take them and place them for adoption. You must have helped thousands of children, saved thousands of children's lives. Tell me why that project was needed and why it was so important.
We would be picking up kids. People would call us, say, there's a child in our building, come take that baby away. So Edie told me, listen, why don't we keep a jula outside the Edie center? And that way people can just come and drop their children there.